So good afternoon, everyone. Today I would like to present the result of my research, which I conducted with my friend Muhammad Sadra Hosseini, who is also a PhD student at the University of Washington. We work under the direction and supervision of Professor Ken Yulin, who is an associate professor of the Department of Construction Management at the University of Washington. So before we begin, I would like to introduce you to our background of research. We don't know when disaster is going to hit or how strong it is, especially if it is an earthquake. We can only predict the time frame it's going to happen and the range of the strength of the earthquake itself, but we can't predict how strong it is. And we can also predict when exactly it's going to happen. So whenever a disaster hits us, it will leave trails of wreckage, especially infrastructure and buildings. And for this research, we would like to focus more on the building side of it because we feel like that is where our research will have an impact on it. And of course, after the breakage occurred, there will be recovery efforts, mainly in the building reconstruction. And the process of the reconstruction itself will expose everyone to hazard. I would like to relate this to my experience about 10 years ago when I was in Indonesia when an earthquake hits my town. So a lot of building was damaged at that time. And the National Disaster Mitigation Agency of Indonesia recruited several students, and there were a lot of students that participated, and then they were given a task to investigate and inspect any damaged buildings to determine whether the building is still safe or not. And this happens before any construction is going on. So this happens like 1 or 2 weeks after the disaster hits the town. And we had to enter the buildings, and we were not aware about any of the risks or any of the hazards that were present inside the building. So essentially, we are risking ourselves to go inside the building, and anything could happen. Well, thankfully, nothing happened, but still, there is the hazard that we have to be aware of. So based on that experience, we would like to propose a system that can be tailored based on the time and location of the disaster that can be useful to train the workers or anyone who works in the disaster area or the disaster site. So we conducted several literature reviews, and we found that VR, AR, photogrammetry, and laser scanning has been studied extensively in regards to disaster mitigation and recovery. So we found that photogrammetry can be used for augmented reality application for building structural evaluation, and aerial photogrammetry can be used to assess a damage of an area, and also it can be used as a reference for a post-disaster reconstruction plan. And our goal with this study is to visually assess how detailed a photogrammetry model can be generated from a video, to provide an overview of assets creation for disaster training tool, and to assess the viability of the photogrammetry model for use in virtual reality environment. And lastly, to propose a system that can be deployed for evaluation of workers' risk awareness before entering a disaster area or disaster site. So what we are proposing is a VR system that is potential for using the model, that is potential to evaluate the workers' hazard awareness. The system itself can be used to easily measure the workers' attention before entering the disaster site. The system has to be customizable depending on the location of the disaster itself. And the system must be able to be prepared quickly in a short time, because whenever a disaster hit, we would like the environment of the system to reflect the actual environment on the disaster area. So why did we use VR and photogrammetry? So unlike AR and mixed reality, virtual reality can immerse the user into a different environment, whereas AR puts an object on a screen, and MR is like combination of AR and VR, they don't really bring in a real immersion to the user. And also, photogrammetry can be used for rapid generation of the disaster area, as has been pointed by previous presentation. And next thing is drones can be deployed to acquire the images or footage needed to produce a model of the disaster area. So the thing with doing photogrammetry is you have to go to the site and take photos manually. And that itself can be rendered useless because you have to go inside the building and take photos. Might as well do the evaluation right there. So our idea is to get a drone and put the drone inside the building and manually control the drone while the drone itself is capturing the footage of the building. We feel that it's more financially viable for us and faster because we didn't have to mount any kind of laser scanning or setting a path for the drone because we don't know the layout of the building when we are capturing the photos needed for reconstruction of the model. So we acquired a video from the internet with the permission of the owner, Louis Wild, who captured this in Philippines in 2014 after a typhoon hit the area. And the video resolution is pretty good. It was captured in HD, 1920 by 1080p, and recorded at 60 frames per second. So we extracted the images at 2 frames per second in order to get a lot of image needed to reconstruct the 3D model. So once we extracted the image, we put the image in a photogrammetry tool. In this case, we use PhotoScan, which is quite affordable for us. And then we align the photos using software algorithm to generate a sparse point cloud data. And then we validate the path generated by this PhotoScan with the actual drone footage. So as you can see here, these blue squares are the path that the drone took when when capturing the footage. And after that, we generate the dense point cloud based on the sparse point cloud, and then we convert into mesh and texture the model. And after that, we decimate the model so that we can get adequate performance when we are presenting in virtual reality. And after that, we bring it to Unreal Engine 4 so we can present it in virtual reality. And as you can see in the picture, there's 3 videos. On the top left is the original footage of the drone, and the top right is the original mesh we generated in PhotoScan, and the lower left is the mesh that we put in virtual reality. As you can see, the texture resolution for the VR model is considerably lower when compared with the original model, and it also lost some fidelity, and there's also some noise on the surface. However, with the lower fidelity, the model is still recognizable, and we think it is still viable for use in virtual reality applications. So now we have the model. What are we going to do with it afterwards? So we have the idea of using heat map to evaluate whether the person using the virtual reality really paying attention to any hazards that is present in the disaster site. So we achieve the heat map function in Unreal Engine 4's blueprint. Essentially, we draw a straight line from the virtual camera, and whenever the line hits a mesh, it will increase the value of the texture. It will increase the color value of the texture. So whenever a person is looking at an object, the object will gradually change from a neutral color. In this case, we use blue, and then it will change to yellow and then red. And this is the result. So we think that the heat map can be used to evaluate whether workers or inspection team members pay attention towards the hazard. So in theory, more attention is indicated when a person looks more frequently at an object. But this is something that we are going to do in our future research in the next phase of this research. And from our study, we found several benefits and challenges of using photogrammetry and VR for evaluating the workers and trainers' attention. So first, in terms of the photogrammetry object, we can quickly deploy it into the system because the model can be generated rapidly within a few hours instead of modeling it in 3D modeling tool such as 3D Studio Max or Revit. And the original footage can be used for other purposes. It should be noted that we use drone footage instead of taking photos from the drone. So if we are just capturing images, those images will be used solely for reconstructing the 3D model. But if we take footage, that footage can be used for other purposes that is not strictly related to the disaster reconstruction or something else. So it can also be used for a quick evaluation system for people working in disaster site. However, there are several challenges. First, there's no guarantee that the model will always be good, because in this case, we're going to put a drone without knowing what exactly the layout of the interior of the building. So when we capture the footage, we might not be able to cover the entire area. So there might be a lot of holes when we generate the models. And also, the models, when poorly optimized, could cause bad performance. And also, we experienced some texture incompatibility with the 3D modeling tool, and it caused us additional work. We had to do some retopology of the 3D model. And the conclusion, even though photogrammetry is not as sophisticated as laser scanning, it can still be used to generate a viable model if automation is involved. In this case, using the drone during the image acquisition process. Also, it can be used. It can be more efficient to capture footage if we would like to do this rapidly. And VR and AR implementation can be done to allow visual assessment or as a workers training module. So that is the presentation of my research. If you will have a question, feel free to ask me.